everybody, welcome to Day 5, Breakfast with Bob from Hotel West End in beautiful Nice. My name is Bob Babbitt, brought to you by Master Spas, SFuels Go Longer, HOKA, Let's Fly, deboer wetsuits, Form Smart Swim Goggles, Zoot Sports, the original triathlon brand, Quintana Roo, Premium Plus Sports, and of course, our Challenged Athletes Foundation. There is no stat in the sport of triathlon that this next young man has not created and expounded upon. His name is Thorsten Radde. Look at that. I almost got that right.
Perfect for an American. Thank you.
And we have a lower standard, a much lower standard. From Tri Rating and his Nice report, which you have to have before race day. This is the only printed copy. Thank you very much, Thorsten. I'll take this with me. Now, the only printed copy. So, Thorsten, it's one thing to do the stats for something like Kona, which has so much history. This event, that people have not ridden a course with nearly 8,000 feet of climbing before in a world championship with a field that is so deep. Talk a little about the challenge for you to try to handicap this thing.
Well, there's like a million things that make predicting this race just based on statistics really tricky and weird.
Yes.
The first thing is the course, as you mentioned. No one in this type of field has ridden this course before. We have had almost the same course used for the last 2 years of Nice, so we can take part of those results.
Right.
But the fields were, there were a couple of interesting athletes in there, a couple of good winners with Rudy and Clement.
Yeah.
But we did not have that depth of field that we
Yes.
see for World Championships.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things where no one really knows what's going to happen out on the bike course. Are they going to ride, 4:45-ish, like the times for Rudy or Clement would have been? Or is there dynamics in the field where the front pushes off each other, someone goes crazy at the front, and we see crazy bike times here? So that's one thing that is really hard to do. They did changes for this year to really get up to 180K for the bike course.
Yes,
it used to be slightly shorter, so we have added that out and back section. It straightened some of the downhills too. So no one's really ridden this course any day before.
No.
It's the first time we'll be on race day. And then, that's one thing. The second thing is what happens on the run, because the run course will be interesting. It'll be fast. How do those dynamics play out? And then we've had other things that we're still pretty much in the comeback trail for a number of athletes after injuries or COVID.
Right.
So if we take, for example, Jan.
4 surgeries in the last few years, yeah.
Basically, since his last big race he did well was Kona 2019.
Right.
So that's 4 years ago. And what did he do since then? A DNF in Rot and fourth in Hamburg this year.
Right.
So on the Ironman distance, he has not really performed up to that standard. And my usual model kind of discounts older results and weighs the newer results a bit more.
Right.
So if I'd run that, then Frodo would have just been
an also ran
yes.
rather than being the guy who you think might win.
Yes. And I think that's pretty much the data for me looks like it, that
Yes.
Frodo is the one who's, the favorite, but I give him like odds for winning chances, maybe 20%.
Yes.
So it's not like something weird has to happen for him not to win, rather the other way around.
Well, like we went into 2019. Actually, we went into 2000 after he'd won in 15, going into 16, the overwhelming favorite, right? He's a champion.
Yeah, because he's got the overall package. He's a strong swimmer, he's a strong biker, he's a strong runner. And one of the things that I talked with a couple of people was that we've never really seen him challenged on the run in an Ironman distance race.
Right.
Because he was always in that good position off the bike, and he was going off with people who are not quite at his level of running.
Right.
So he was never really pushed in the last 10K. And that might change here. He may have to chase someone down, and you may have someone like maybe Patrick breathing down his neck. So he will be forced to go hard for the full race. And hopefully he still has the goods to deliver at the epic age of 42.
So Patrick Lange, who I think is fascinating, 2-time Ironman World Champion, best pure runner in the sport, 2:30 marathon at both Roth and at Israel.
Yeah.
Here, and I think the run course, 4 loops, big crowds, hot, that sets up well for him. I mean, I think even with the half hour or so extra on the bike, he can still run really fast. What do you think about him? Because I think a lot of people have never looked at him as a great cyclist, but I don't think the Kona course is set up for him. He's not a sit in the aero position, push 400 watts type of guy. What are your thoughts on Patrick?
I think Patrick's, or what Patrick told me was he feels his running is overrated and his biking is underrated.
Oh, interesting.
Obviously, that was before he ran the 230s, because I don't think you can kind of
overvalue
overvalue that. I mean, that is just amazing times, and I don't think anyone has run close.
Right.
And I expect him to be the fastest runner, but the question will be, does it still matter after the bike? Because if he's, I don't know, how much was he down? 14 minutes
Yes,
in road to Magnus?
Roads, and he ran 230,
He ran
didn't
230,
matter.
yeah, but that didn't really matter. I mean, he was good in road, and to finish second is a great result, but I don't think he came to Nice to finish second.
Right.
So he needs to be a lot closer to the front, or the main guys
off the bike.
The bike. And I think he has to take some extra risk on the bike for that. Go harder than he probably is prepared to do. But knowing Björn, his coach, who has a cycling background, that'll be the area that they've looked to, and that'll be he will have a plan of what he needs to do to only lose like 6 or 8 minutes to the good bikers on this course. If he's going to pull that off, that's one of the questions, right?
That's what makes this fun.
Yes,
because you can't really predict. We were all sort of guessing because we don't have any track record on these guys.
Well, and at the same time, you've got such a deep field, and the differences, even if I calculate them, are so small that it's a minute or 2 or 3 or 5 between the top 10.
Right.
Someone having a good day changes the picture completely. Someone doing something dumb on the run or on the bike, missing a feed station, losing a bottle, that can just throw things up in the air for them. So it's really hard to print the results before the races happen, right? I do have a seedings table in the report.
Yes.
But that is basically just going to show how close the race is going to be. And for me, it's more a basis of figuring out, okay, what will the race dynamics look like? Is there a group that might go off the front, and then who might use, I don't know, someone like a Cam Wurf biking through the field?
Right.
Who could use him as kind of a springboard to get to the front of it as well? So if, I don't know, Joe Skipper or Leon Chevalier swim at the same time like Cam, can they use Cam, who rides always very strong but very even, to help them on their way to the front where they need to be if they want to be in top 5 contention again?
So you look at Magnus Dietlef and you look at Sam Laidlaw, what they did at Roth, where they basically tag teamed the bike course and got away from Patrick. And obviously, all those guys want to get away from Patrick. That's part of the deal. I've seen
including
Magnus,
Frodo.
Exactly, including Frodo, especially Frodo. Magnus, I've seen him. He's like carrying a scale around everything. He does a swim, and he's trying to. He's very scientific, and he's trying to figure out, okay, how much weight am I losing during the swim, and so how much nutrition do I need to get in before I attack that really tough bike course? How do you see the race playing out?
It starts hard to predict with the swim, because we don't have that dominating swimmer who's going to go off the front and wants to show his cards there. So that's the first question that I have is, what will the swim look like, and is there someone going to push the pace and thin out the field? I think Jan and a couple others would love to have someone like Josh in the field who swims the salt, but to spread it out and to start building a gap to maybe to Ditlev and then also to Patrick, who's a little bit both of them have worked on their swim and could very well come off the front group.
Right.
But if the pace is on, maybe they get dropped and maybe they got like a minute to make up in the first hill to get up to Frodo. How much time do people like Cam Wurf or Joe Skipper and Chevalier, how much time do they lose, and what does it mean for their race? So that's the first question. Then once they're on the bike, I do think there will be either a lone person going off the front or a small group, like we've seen in St. George with the 5 that worked pretty much together.
Yes.
For the whole bike course, and I would think that the first big climb will kind of sort out the weaker bikers who were able to swim well. And then the second climb will figure out, okay, which group is going off the front and who can be in that group. Is there a Magnus going off the front there? Is Frodo able to follow him?
Right.
Is Sam Laidlaw going to do something crazy again on the bike? Has Cam Wurf been able to move through the field after a swim deficit and get to the front as well. So those would be the kind of people, yeah,
Yes.
you could see at the front, but always, what will really happen on race day?
The other thing that's fun is interviewing Braden Curry. Today we'll have Bradley Weiss. Yesterday, Brent McMahon. Brent McMahon was so excited about this course. He's 43, and he's going, what's great about this course, it's the purest course he's ever seen. And he was just beaming, talking about, hey, there's speed bumps, there's sewer covers, there's all, it's as close to a mountain bike race as I've ever seen in a road triathlon. Can those guys play a role?
There are certainly, I mean, there's a group of a lot of people that are not the top favorites,
Right.
but who could do really well here. And does doing really well for them mean anything more than a top 5 or a podium?
Yes.
Can they play a role for the win? That's always a little bit iffy, but
Right.
someone like Brad Weiss, or, I mean, Braden Curry biked on the front group in St. George.
The whole time, yeah. They're a group of 5.
Yeah, he's strong. He's a smart racer, which I think you need to be here because it's easy to overcook it on this course. So you will need to be you need to bike fast, but you also need to bike smart to still have enough left in the tank for the run.
Right.
Which is going to be crazy hard too, because running 42K in the heat. I mean, no, it's not Kona heat, but it's still hot and
It's
warm,
very
and,
hot.
and it's going to play a role. So you need to start the run with a full tank, and being able to do that will just require smart racing on the bike, knowing when to eat. And Braden is certainly someone who has the experience to do that. We talked to his coach yesterday, and he said, well, for us, it's normal to have a 4:30 bike ride.
Right.
For the Europeans, the times are always in the 4-hour range.
Right,
The extra
yes.
half hour on the bike, how much does that change things, and additional nutrition that you need?
Yes.
Magnus rode 3:57 in the road. Now he's going to be, well, everyone's guess is
45
slightly
minutes
over
more, yeah.
4:30.
Yes.
So it could easily be 35, 40 minutes that he's longer
Extra
on the
time,
bike.
Yes. And it's interesting when I was talking to Magnus about the climb circuit, I was like, oh, you're too big. You can't climb that well on this course. And he's like, a lot of the uphills, he felt the grades were not that steep.
Yes.
And he felt that this is sort of a power climbing type of course that suits him really, really well. You agree?
Power climb, well, there's a couple of shorter, steeper sections, especially at the start. But most of the long climb where they grind away for like 45 minutes probably, feels like it's 4%, 5%.
Yes.
He can probably still ride that in aero. I mean, obviously he only has a big chain ring, so he doesn't need to shift to the small one. But that is just something he can, where sustained power is the important one,
Right.
and not have those short, punchy climbs that can make a decision in bike riding, in pure bike riding. And having the sustained power output, that is something that he's really good at. And he's shown in Roth that he knows how to handle the uphills. There's a couple steep climbs in Roth. Kalvarienberg is a pretty steep and longish one. If he's been able to get up that in his 62th chainring,
Yes.
I think he can power up here as well. And then, yeah, we'll just have to see how much he's going to be able to, if he's going to do just ride with the lighter guys on the uphills, or whether he can actually
Get away.
power away from them.
The French contingent here with Rudy and Clement, and there's so many guys, Leon, and having this hometown advantage, because when they get on the run, it is going to be crazy loud for those guys.
Yeah, the French guys, they have the biggest contingent of pros here.
Yes.
For the first time ever.
Wow.
It always was USA, Australia, or Germany. It was always back and forth in Kona. Now the Frenchies have jumped to the front, 8 or 9 pros in the men's field. And I think, we'll have one of them do really, really well.
Yes.
I don't know who it's going to be. But I wouldn't be surprised to have a Frenchman on the podium here in Nice because, yes, just the number of people who qualified and accepted their slots shows how much it's worth to them to race here in front of their home crowd. And all of them typically have done well in mountain bike mountainous courses, Embrunman, Alpe d'Huez. If you go through the list, Rudy won here, Clement won here, Nick Heldorn, a Dutch guy, won Embrun. So there's a couple of people who showed that they can ride really well in the mountains. Maybe not quite in that depth of field that we have
Right.
here. So lots of interesting people to look for.
It's funny, when I was looking for folks to interview, one of the things I did look at was Embrum and Optiwez, and because people, these are long, a lot of them are long sustained climbs as well. But you mentioned Nick Haldorn, whose dad we covered back in the day. I think he finished 7th in Kona a couple times. And then there's a Robert Vilkovici and different folks like that. We saw 2 weeks ago with 70.3 Worlds, Rico winning, and third place guy, a lot of newcomers, new faces. Yeah. And my feel is, out of that top 10, you can see folks that people are like, who the hell are they?
Yeah, I mean, we typically have that in Kona as well, that someone places really well, no one really knew his name before, and then you look back at the stats and you can point out,
you can say, we should have seen that.
There was the glimpse.
Exactly.
I mean, with Rico, everyone goes back and says, he won 70.3 Kraichgau against Patrick Lange this year before. So obviously that was a sign.
We should have seen that,
Yes. But there's so many races and so many B and C races where you don't really know what it's worth. So it's always coming down to those big fields, big races, the one day where everyone has to perform. And that's something that Jan has been extremely good at, pick his race and perform to the best of his abilities on the day that it matters most. And I don't know, we haven't seen that from Sam Laidlow. We haven't seen that from a number of other younger guys who just don't have the experience there. We'll see.
What's fascinating is someone that you mentioned, Sam Laidlaw, and really surprised a lot of people. Everybody thought when he came off the bike he'd fade, and nobody thought he was going to run 2:44,
including me.
All of us, right? All of us thought, because that was his history.
Yeah.
And really, if Gustav runs 2:38, Sam's the reigning Ironman World Champion. He forced Gustav to run a 2:36 marathon to win the Ironman.
And that's one of the moments that I find really fascinating to look back on. He and Christian, Gustav and Christian, were still running together, coming back from the energy lab.
Yes.
And you could really tell that Gustav was making a conscious decision of, if we want to catch Sam, we need to step it up.
Yeah.
Can you follow me or not? I need to put the pedal to the metal and go for it.
Right.
Maybe risking a DNF,
sure,
but going for it. And I think we may see a similar moment here where, I don't know, Patrick at the end of the second loop realizes, he might be on 2:30 pace, but to get where he wants to,
he's got to run 2:27.
He's got to run 2:28 or 2:27,
yes.
Because the gap is not coming down soon enough, and you can't really rely that someone's going to explode in the last lap.
Right.
And then being forced, or maybe it's Frodo who's forced to do that because Magnus is so far off, to really go for all in and win or DNF, basically. That's what it comes down to them.
It's funny that you say that, because I think you're absolutely right. Jan Frodeno, Patrick Lange, it's win, right? To get second, third, fourth is not something, I mean, they'll take it, but it's not something they're here for. I think there's a lot of guys, if they finished top 5, if they're in a podium position, they're not going to risk it and go for the win. And where someone like a Frodo and Patrick and guys like that, they're going to throw down.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the decision everyone has to make before the race, because it also affects how do they pace their bike and how much risk are they going to take on the bike.
Right.
Are we going for, I don't know, a safe top 10?
Right.
With 40 starters, you always know there's someone who having an off day.
Right.
And we've seen time and time again in Kona that even if you're 20 minutes off the bike in T2 and you have a good run, you can still work yourself into the top 10.
Right.
If that is your goal, and if that is what you're looking for, you will have a completely different strategy than if your goal is to go for podium or the win.
Right.
And I think that's why maybe the DNF quota for some of the top guys is a little bit bigger, because they need to take bigger risks in Kona, or here in those deep fields, if they want to win the title. And that goes through the whole day. That goes, how hard do I swim? How hard do I tackle the first climbs on the bike? How much time do I give myself to properly eat and drink? Or do I go off the front and push the pace there? How much risk am I going to take in the final downhill back to Nice? Or final downhill. I mean, it's 30K of downhill. It's not like you have one, like in St. George, where we had that big, pretty much straight downhill into town.
Yes.
Completely different picture here, because it's the final hour of the race where it'll be downhill and then a final flat section along the promenade again, where you need to eat, you need to drink, and you need to think about the run. But still, that could be an interesting part of the race, and see how the gaps develop there.
This downhill is different from the perspective of everybody we talked to who said, you're not coasting anywhere. That downhill, you are pedaling that entire time because you have to. It's a different type of downhill than these guys are used to.
It's a different downhill because you have to pedal, but because you also have to be really focused on what's in front of you. There's a couple of speed bumps that are really tricky to maneuver, and if you hit one of those without knowing it's coming up, that could easily be someone on your face, or bottles flying everywhere that you relied on to finish in that downhill, twists and turns, flats and counter surges again. So there's a lot of action there, and you have to. There's very little spots on the course where you can just go down in your aero bars and just push power. You always have to look ahead and focus on the road and ride your bike, and not just Zwift on your bike.
Well, when we interviewed Mark Allen earlier in the week, and he was talking about going into the 95 Ironman, and he knew it was going to be his last race. He had announced that he was retiring after the race. And I asked him, I said, you know, that's basically what Frodo's done. This is my last race, and he had made the announcement of the last race. I said, did that put more pressure on you, knowing it's your last race? He says, you know what? It was the most freeing thing I ever did. It made me so relaxed, because I realized as I was training, this is my next to last swim I will ever do. And on race day, it just made him feel like, hey, I've won this thing 5 times. I can go to my condo. It's no big deal. And so he was playing with a little bit of house money. Do you feel that Frodo was sort of in that same mindset that, hey, you know what? I've won this thing 3 times. I've won 2 Ironman 70.3 Worlds. I've won a gold medal. Whatever I do here doesn't really affect my legacy, so I can just go for it.
On one hand, yes. On the other hand, no, because I think Frodo could have retired after 2019, and that would have been a great Mark Allen type of ending. Finishing Kona, winning with the course record, that would have been an amazing end to his career. He decided to go on, and I'm sure there's been a couple of days where he kicked himself and said, I should have retired back in 2019. Then we had COVID, he had his injuries, he had a couple
surgeries,
not so good years. And for him to work back on the level that we've seen in Milwaukee at the PTO Open, and hopefully on Sunday too, that will have been a huge investment in time and energy for him. I don't think he will be content if he has a flat after 30K and call it a day. I think he's here to really race his heart out for the final time and leave the scene with a big bang too. Whether that's enough for the win, but to give 100% and to have the race that like we had for Chrissy, the final race that Chrissy did, where she raced her heart out. She left everything on the course, and after crossing the finish line, she realized there's nothing left. And I think that would be something that Frodo is looking for. And I haven't met, I can't say anyone, because of course there's always some who say, well, he's not that good. But I think the whole scene would be really happy for him to have an awesome race on Sunday.
No question.
To have some fun racing, but to see him go out strong and proud of what he was able to achieve on Sunday too, and not just look back on his career. I've had better days, and those will carry the day. As
the champion he is, that's the only thing you want. So you're top 3 again? No pressure.
So the line that I've used all week is, I think we're going to have 1 German. I think we're going to have one of the French guys, and I'm counting Rudy in that French group as well. And there's going to be 1 surprise.
There you go.
If you want to hear names, I'd go with Frodo. I'll go with Clément Mignon, and surprise with Braden Curry.
Braden Curry. There you go. And you know what I think is really cool, having athletes here from Italy and from Poland who are top contenders. And it shows that this is becoming a real worldwide sport.
Yeah, I think I haven't looked at the full numbers yet, but we're going to have a different distribution, both among the pros, where I was able to look at it, but also among the age groupers from different nations. I think U.S. will be many fewer
Yes.
than we've seen in Kona, with other nations picking up, and just going through the list of pros and where they're raced and how young they are. At some points, you really see that shift. And in my top three, I just missed someone like Magnus. We've seen the Norwegians win the last two ones. Magnus winning this one from Frodo would be kind of it would underline that the torch has passed from the old guys, from the Germans to the Scandinavians. We'll see if that happens.
And it's a little bit of a rubber match, because think about it. It's Roth in 2022, when we thought we're going to have this run with Jan and with Magnus, and then Jan had an Achilles issue and dropped out. Then in Milwaukee, we thought we were going to have that, and then Magnus had his internal combustion issues, and he's out. And so this is a little bit of the rubber match. It's 1-1 right now.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many one-on-one matches that would be super interesting to see, even if they're not running side by side. Frodo versus Patrick. Throw Magnus in there. I'm sure others will want to play a role in that too. But the one-on-ones and the storylines we can draw from that, we'll have books to write on it.
We'll have a few beers and discuss that. Thorsten, thank you so much for taking time. Thank you for bringing what you've brought to the sport. You've really brought a scientific approach to. It's really great, because it leads to discussion, and discussion is always fun, and it brings out. Listen, we're all passionate about the sport, and having these passionate arguments about no, Jan is better than Patrick. That's how a sport grows.
Yes, and I think there's a lot of people who say, well, you've already printed the results in there. No, I think to me they're not the answer.
No.
They're just questions that are being asked and a conversation starter.
Yes.
And to have the conversation based on data and mix that in with a bit of heart and a bit of feeling for what might happen, I think that makes the sport more interesting. And that's part of the storytelling that we need to get better at. And that triathlon, well, sometimes we've been a bit geeky, just looking at this one result or that one result, but to see the people behind it, to see the data, and to mix all that up could really help grow our sport even further than we've seen now.
So a lot of people think, oh, Thorsten makes his living doing this, right? This is a passion play for you, right? This is something you love. This. What's your real job?
So my real job is I'm an IT consultant, mostly working in the financial industry. So regulations in the EU, that's some of the stuff I do, and help implement the IT systems for that. And for me, it just started, 10 years ago, just collecting data, and then realizing, there's people who are interested in that beside me. Yes. And it's become a side gig. It wouldn't pay the bills.
No, it would never pay the bill. Thorsten, thank you so much for taking so much time. And if people want to subscribe to Tri Rating?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. Always an honor to be invited to these type of shows. If people want to have the report, this is the only printed copy that is out there that I just did for me. Yes. Go to trirating.com, and there's a link up there where you can download your PDF copy of the report. Love it. It's free and donationware, so a lot of people donate, and I have a problem putting a fixed price on it. But back when there were magazines, I don't know, you can still remember that.
I certainly remember that.
There were printed magazines. They were like $5 or $8. So that's what I suggest to people. But if you download it for free and read it, there's a lot of discussion around how the race developed last year or in Kona, and what might be happening this year. And I just love putting that together, and a lot of people like to have a look at it too, and then tell me that I missed the obvious conclusion.
You never miss the obvious. Thorsten from trirating.com has been our guest. Again, Breakfast with Bob, Hotel West End. Hold on. We will be right back.